Brandon Sullivan is a bachelor who lives in New York City, but a compulsive addiction to sex rules his life. This obsession constantly consumes his thoughts, leading him to invite call girls to his apartment frequently. Brandon has a sister named Sissy, a lounge singer, but he routinely ignores her morning phone calls, revealing an emotional disconnection between them. One day, as Brandon commutes to work via the metro, he spots a young woman. Unable to control his impulses, he leans at her with a predatory look, making her visibly uncomfortable. He even starts to fall over, but she skillfully loses herself in the crowd of people. Frustrated, Brandon continues on to his office. Even there, in the loneliness of the office restroom, he satisfies his urges through five-finger excitement. His office laptop contains a collection of inappropriate videos, further highlighting the extent of his addiction. At home, while once again immersed in OnlyFans, Brandon's phone rings repeatedly. It is Sissy delivering the dramatic news that she has terminal cancer and only a week to live. Clearly, none of these are true and just an attempt to catch Brandon's attention, because despite the gravity of the situation, Brandon dismisses the call by hanging up, another indication of his emotional detachment from her sister. At work, Brandon's boss, David, also happens to be his close friend. After work, they head out to a club to unwind. David is smitten by a young woman there. He buys her drinks and even shares a dance with her on the dance floor. However, it is Brandon who catches her eye. When she leaves the club with her car, she offers Brandon a lift. They stop at an empty sidewalk and share a hot, intimate moment. Returning home later, Brandon hears music and voices coming from inside his apartment. Fearing a thief, he arms himself with a baseball bat. Upon investigating, he discovers that it isn't a thief, but rather Sissy, who is taking a bath in his bathroom. It turns out she had a key to his place, and given his refusal to take her calls, she had come to New York and entered his apartment unannounced. That evening, Brandon overhears Sissy engaged in a heart-wrenching phone conversation with her lover Mark, begging him not to abandon her and reject her affection. Sissy has recently landed a few singing gigs in New York, and she asks Brandon if she could stay with him for a short period. She had previously lived with her boyfriend, but her boyfriend cheated on her, deeply hurting her. Aware of her emotional chaos, Brandon agrees to let Sissy live with him for a while. The following day, Sissy invites Brandon to attend one of her performances. He replies that he would certainly participate in her show if he finishes work early. As he heads to the office, he finds out that a computer virus has caused all the workplace computers to be sent for repair. His boss and friend David inquires about his plans for the evening. When Brandon mentions Sissy's singing performance, David is interested in joining him. That night, Brandon and David go to see Sissy's show, where she performs a moving version of New York, New York. Brandon finds himself touched by his sister's musical talent, becoming somewhat emotional and teary-eyed. David is also impressed and tells Brandon that Sissy has an incredible voice. After the performance, David and Sissy strike up a conversation, with David initiating flirtation. During their interaction, David notices scars on Sissy's arms, signs of self-inflicted wounds. She calmly explains that she did that when she was a bored teenager. Brandon observes all of this, feeling uneasy about David's flirtatious behavior with his sister. After the show, the three of them share a taxi ride home. The atmosphere grows increasingly tense as Brandon watches Sissy and David share a passionate kiss next to him in the back seat. His discomfort escalates when Sissy and David have sex in his own bedroom, hearing them dirty talking and moaning. Frustrated and unable to cope with the situation, Brandon wears his running clothes and decides to go out for a late-night jog. Upon his return, Brandon fixes his bed for the mess left by Sissy and David. Sissy tries to join him in bed when he is about to sleep, since Brandon assigned her to sleep on the sofa. Losing his temper, he angrily orders her to leave the room, intensifying the emotional rift between them. The next day, David calls Brandon into his office and informs him that a substantial collection of OnlyFans videos has been found on his office computer's hard drive, putting Brandon in a dangerous situation. This reveals not only the extent of his addiction, but also the risks it poses to his professional life. However, David thinks the adult videos might be the work of an intern. Right then, David gets a video call from his wife and kids. Taking the opportunity, Brandon slips out of the office without saying anything more. Later, Brandon goes out on a date in a restaurant with a co-worker named Marianne. She is newly separated and believes strongly in the idea of commitment and long-term relationships. Brandon, on the other hand, is not into that. He even admits that the longest relationship he has ever been in was only 4 months. They talk a bit, and then when they get to the subway, they decide to go their separate ways and head home. When Brandon gets back to his apartment, he goes to the bathroom to self-relieve, but he forgets to lock the door. Soon after, Sissy comes home and walks right into the bathroom, catching him in the act. She quickly leaves, but Brandon gets really mad. He yells at her and then locks himself in the bathroom. A little later, Sissy notices that there is an inappropriate live stream open on Brandon's laptop. Seeing this, she finally understands that her brother has a severe problem with this addiction. She is so upset that she decides to walk out of the house, alone in his apartment. Brandon takes time to think deeply about what is going on in his life. He makes a big decision. He throws away all his porn, his toys, and even his laptop, wanting to make a change. The next day at work, he runs into Marianne again. They share a kiss in the office and decide to get a hotel room. But things don't go as planned. Brandon can't pitch a tent, and Marianne ends up leaving. Later, Brandon has aggressive adult time with a prostitute in that very same hotel room. That evening, while Brandon is sitting at home watching TV, Sissy comes back. She starts talking about David, and Brandon immediately tells her to stay away from him because David has a family. Brandon confronts Sissy angrily, asking, "Didn't you see the wedding ring on his finger?" Sissy replied that she had not noticed. After settling down a bit, Sissy tries to apologize to Brandon for the uncomfortable situation she has been causing. However, instead of calming down, Brandon becomes more irritated and angrier. He tells Sissy that their current living situation is not working, and she needs to find somewhere else to stay. Sissy protests, saying she has nowhere else to go. She tells him that, as a family, they should be helping each other. Brandon replies harshly, calling her irresponsible and labeling her a burden that keeps on dragging him down, and a parasite who always relies on him. Disturbed by all these, Brandon leaves the house and goes to a bar. Here, he approaches a woman and starts talking explicitly about what he wants to do with her. Just when she seems about to give in, her boyfriend steps in. Unfazed, Brandon laughs in the man's face. After leaving the bar, he gets followed by the boyfriend, who proceeds to beat him up brutally. The tension doesn't end there. Brandon goes to a gay club, where he becomes intimate with a man. After leaving, he checks his phone and listens to a voice message from Sissy. She's crying and apologizing, asking him to pick up her calls, which he has been ignoring. Despite hearing her emotional plea, Brandon continues to head straight to a brothel. There, he engages in steamy time with two women at the same time. When Brandon thinks things can't get more chaotic, he takes the metro home. However, the train stops midway. He learns that the stoppage is due to someone committing suicide on the tracks. This news disturbs him to the core, fueling his worry for Sissy. Desperately, he starts calling her, but she doesn't answer. Upon arriving home, Brandon is met with a horrifying scene. Sissy, his sister, lies on the bathroom floor, her wrists slashed and surrounded by a pool of her own blood. With a sense of urgency, he immediately tries to stop the bleeding using his hands while dialing for emergency assistance at the same time. Overcome by emotion, tears stream down his face. Although the situation is dangerous, Sissy is still alive. With a mixture of relief and urgency, Brandon rushes her to the hospital for immediate medical attention. While Sissy is in a state of unconsciousness at the hospital, Brandon takes a quiet moment to examine the many scars on her arms, each a grim testament to her past struggles. As he is engrossed in this silent reflection, Sissy regains consciousness. Brandon's heart fills with immense joy at this moment, and he embraces her tightly, a signal perhaps of a newfound commitment to be there for her. Later, Brandon exits the hospital and begins to wander along the streets. Coincidentally, rain starts to fall from the sky, as if mirroring his emotional disturbance. The raindrops mix with his tears as he cries out loudly and unashamedly. In this intense moment, Brandon becomes acutely aware of the many wrongs he has committed in his life. Filled with resolve, he makes a conscious decision to correct his past mistakes and make compensation, not just for his sake, but also for the people he loves. A few days following this transformative experience, Brandon finds himself on the metro, heading to his workplace. He notices a young woman in the same train car who seems to be watching him intently. She makes obvious attempts to flirt with him, casting provoking glances his way. In a move that marks his change, Brandon deliberately chooses to ignore her advances. This small act signifies his reformation and commitment to leading a more responsible life. And so, in this subtle yet powerful way, the story comes to a close, leaving us with a sense of hope for Brandon's journey toward redemption. What did you guys think of this movie? Certainly one of reflection on our own lives and addiction.